Okay. You guys asked, I'm here to deliver. You wanted pro-life responses to pro-abortion talking points. We're going to jump right into it. We have Autumn Higashi, who is an apologetics extraordinaire. She actually has a show called Unapologetic, which you should obviously check out. But without further ado, we're going to jump right in. Autumn, thank you so much for joining us on Speak Out today. I know that you are being inundated with DMs and messages like, hey, can you tell me how you would respond to this? Or somebody just said this, what's the pro-life response? And I'm being inundated, and pro-lifers everywhere are. So I think this is a good way to kind of just give back to everybody and say, hey, here's a resource, use us. Here's all the pro-choice arguments. Here's how we debunk them. Here's how we combat them. And here's a pro-life response. So we're going to jump right into it. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely excited.
First things first, the one we hear all the time is, it's my body, my choice. What is the response that we have for that? We can do a little bit of back and forth, but what is your response when somebody says my body, my choice?
This argument is so funny because they can and will use it no matter what you say. Any pro-life argument, that is their response, because it's almost their like holy grail argument, because they think, if I can just say this, then all other arguments become meaningless. And so it's honestly a way for them to shut down the conversation. Pro-choicers don't really want to have a dialogue about abortion, about when life begins, about the harms and side effects of abortion, and, you know, the long list of things that are a result of abortion. They don't want to talk about it. They simply want the little soundbite, which we all know to be true, is my body, my choice. I think the best way to address this, first of all, is acknowledging that at some point it becomes not her body, right? You give birth, and at that point we all know it's a baby. It has its own limbs.
Right,
So
you're not giving birth to your own body.
Right, exactly. So the question is, what point is it not a woman's body? And I think that's a great place to start with people who say this. Okay, what about 5 minutes before birth? Okay, the water breaks, the baby's coming. Is it still her body? Should she still be able to kill it? Usually, and hopefully, people will say no. But it's conversations and questions like that that can walk them further and further down the line, because what you'll find is people usually will just kind of blanket statement abortion. When you get into the specifics about, do you agree in no restrictions on abortion? Do you believe in abortion up to 9 months? Do you believe in partial birth abortions? Where is the line? A lot of them have a hard time drawing a line, because I think deep down they know you can't draw a line with human life. It's easy for us to draw a line because we believe in science. It says life begins at conception. Any other line in the sand gets foggy, because you could say, all right, well, a lot of them will say the baby's viable. That's when I think that abortion should be illegal after that point. Okay, well, a baby that is 5 days old can't survive without its mom, right? So viability and our ability to be independent is not what makes us human. That doesn't apply to other circumstances of life. So that doesn't make sense. And it's not scientifically sound. So I think what the best thing with my body, my choice is to first really nail down what they mean by that. Do you really think that there's absolutely no circumstance where abortion is wrong? Okay. Then once you're able to identify that, you can talk about the science. Well, a baby has its own heartbeat. A baby has its own fingers and its toes and its DNA, and they start to grow hair in the womb. Like, we all know that a woman who is pregnant with a baby boy does not have a penis, right? If it's her body, then that means she would have a penis, but we all know that that's not true. So it's things like that, and distinguishing the difference between the baby and the mother. And you can use the scientific development that we know. I mean, 50 years ago, it was easier for people to say it's just a clump of cells. It's almost impossible now. The technology we have with ultrasounds, what we know to be true from science of what life in the womb looks like, what is happening, the development of a baby, that is a huge asset to us to get to share that and to talk about that. So it is annoying, and sometimes the seemingly dumb arguments like my body, my choice are almost harder to respond to when they come at you with it. You're like, okay, I know it's not true, but I just don't know how to get them to see it. And so just rely on science and logic, and they may not concede right away, but the best you can do and the only thing you can do is to share truth with love and just hope that it at least plants a seed in their mind.
You're right. I think a point you make is that we need to be asking them what they believe. Like, sometimes we just automatically want to defend ourselves and
Right.
say, like, we do care about women. We know it's her body, and we want we almost want to go on the defense, but I think we need to also go on the offense and say, well, why do you think this? What, like, at what, like you said, at what point is it not a woman's body anymore? At what point do you acknowledge the baby's body? So asking them those questions is a really good thing to help you figure out where they're coming from, so you know where to come from when you're explaining your beliefs. Up next, we have abortion is healthcare. We know that it's obviously not healthcare because healthcare doesn't kill. Healthcare's goal is to save and to help, and doctors take a Hippocratic oath to do no harm. What is your response to abortion as healthcare?
I think this argument is similar along the lines. I've seen people use them in the same vein as abortion is never medically necessary. And when you talk to professionals in this field, doctors who have not been indoctrinated by the left, they will tell you that abortion is never medically necessary. We know that it is true. In most cases, almost all cases, in times where a baby is no longer able to grow inside the mother's womb, when it becomes a risk to the mother, most of the time that happens after around 22 weeks where the baby can survive outside the womb. So when we say that abortion is never medically necessary, or that when we're combating this argument that abortion is healthcare, right? That's usually what they mean by that. We have to understand that there's a difference between recognizing that a pregnancy is not viable, protecting and providing care for the mother, saving the baby, and doing all that we can to save that child, even if it means early delivery. We're not saying that there's no circumstance where a baby must be delivered early. What we are saying is you don't go in there with forceps and rip the child apart before you deliver the baby. You deliver the baby and give it a fighting chance. That's a difference. And so that's the argument with people are saying abortion is healthcare. No, it's not. It's never medically necessary. It is not a medical treatment. Women don't need abortion. It kills the life of an innocent human being. And like you said, if your healthcare is killing people, you're doing it wrong. That is not healthcare. The purpose of doctors is to provide care, life-saving care, and abortion is a direct violation of what they are supposed to do.
Yeah, I had an OBGYN once who I asked, who didn't know where I stood on the issue of life. He delivered all 3 of my babies, and I didn't know where he stood on the issue of life. And I asked him point blank, has there ever been an instance in your 20 years of being an OBGYN where you've had to kill the baby in order to save the life of the mom? And this kind of touches on a question that we were going to ask later of, what about in cases of the mother's life being in danger?
Right.
And in this instance, you don't have to. Like you said, you do sometimes have to deliver the baby early, and sometimes, very unfortunately, maybe the baby's 16, 17 weeks and medicine and science has not advanced enough to the point that it can save that baby. But you don't go in and dismember that baby. That's not compassionate. What you do is you deliver the baby, you give them a fighting chance. And in the event that they're too young to make it or that they have a fatal condition, you give the baby pain medication or palliative care in order to make them comfortable as they pass with dignity naturally. You don't rip them apart limb by limb. That's not the compassionate answer.
Exactly. And, along that same line, something that I've been hearing over and over and over, and this is probably getting into some of the other arguments that people had already wanted a response to, but I think it does fit here because I have been getting messages from people honestly terrified because the pro-abortion narrative is saying that if we ban abortion, guess what? Miscarriages are illegal and ectopic pregnancies are illegal to get removed. And it's just honestly baffling that people do not understand the difference between abortion, which is the direct and intentional killing of a preborn child, and an instance like miscarriage where the child tragically passes away by no fault of anyone. And so it's important to distinguish that, but I also just want to just declare that miscarriage and ectopic pregnancies are not abortions, and women will still be able to have care after their miscarriages. They will still be able to have treatment for ectopic pregnancies. That is a lie from pro-abortion media to scare you into being pro-choice. That is what they are doing. They want to make people terrified. Think about all the women who have experienced miscarriages, who carry that in immense trauma, and they are now being told that every other woman who has to go through that same circumstance could be put on trial for their miscarriage. That is a lie. That is not going to happen. Tell me one bill, one law where that says that that is what's going to happen. They will not be able to find a law.
Exactly.
They simply are hearing this lie from pro-abortion media because they're grasping at straws right now. They don't have anything other than fear mongering. And
Yeah.
we have seen that every single day on social media. It's insane the things that people are saying and the things that people are believing. It's like, no,
Put it back on
women will
them.
still
That's
have
what you
care.
need to do in an instance like that, where they say a woman's not going to be able to have an already passed baby through that has been that died via miscarriage removed from her womb. Put it back on them. Say, where is that? Where have you
Right.
seen that? What piece of legislation says that? What pro-life bill says that? Show me, because they can't. It's meant to scare you, just like Autumn said. Next up we have, and these are all requests that people have sent in. We're going to try to cover everything. You're just forced or pro-birth. You don't actually care about the baby. You're just pro-birth, which we know is not an insult, because the opposite of pro-birth is pro-death. But you just want to force women to remain pregnant. You're only pro-birth.
I would say I'm pro-birth because I'm anti-dismembering and ripping babies out of the womb. Like, that's the alternative. Okay, yeah, I think that people should be born. First of all, I don't understand how that's an insult or a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think what they're trying to say is you don't care about the baby after it's born. So you just want it to be born and then you want to walk away. Which again is a lie. I mean, you look across the country, there are over 3,000 pregnancy resource centers and 400 maternity homes. And guess who runs those? Pro-lifers. Pro-choicers don't do that. They don't have
They don't do
organizations that are dedicated to providing care for women because they rely so heavily on abortion. I honestly don't even think that they give the time of day to even know that these resources are available. Like, they literally are like, abortion or nothing. Okay, great. Their philosophy is like, oh yeah, I'm pro-choice, right? But what they mean by that is, I will tell you to get an abortion. If you don't want to do that, then that's on you. Great. If you want to choose life, that's on you. That's their approach. And so when they say things like, we're not pro-abortion, we're pro-choice, okay, but you are not actively supporting any other choice other than abortion. And that's the difference between pro-lifers and pro-choicers. Pro-lifers say, okay, let's not kill babies, but we also recognize that there are women who are in need, that are scared and vulnerable, and we love them. We have compassion for them. We want to see them succeed. So how can we do that? It's why things like Standing With You, the initiative of Students for Life, that is literally dedicated to walking alongside women, especially women on college campuses, to make sure that they can finish their degree, to pursue an education, whatever it looks like. We want to walk alongside women. And so when pro-choicers say that pro-lifers are just pro-birth, I'm like, do you not read or know anything? Like, do you not even take a minute of your day to look into what we do? No, you listen to the lies, because pro-choicers don't want women to have access to other options. They don't, because if they did, they wouldn't drive such a wedge between pro-lifers and women in need. They convince everyone that pro-lifers are insane, crazy psychos, which means people don't know that they can come to us. We have open arms. I know for a fact, any pro-lifer that I know, if somebody came to them and said, I'm pregnant, I need help, I'm scared, I don't have enough money, they would drop whatever they're doing. They would get a baby registry, they would throw a baby shower, they would find childcare, they would do literally anything it takes. I know that firsthand. We've done that. Close friends of mine have done that. But the issue is they're creating so much angst against pro-lifers and people who are pro-choice or people who are experiencing unexpected pregnancies that they are actually preventing women from getting care. By fear-mongering, by telling everyone that pregnancy resource centers are fake clinics, whatever. I don't even know what they say. All that they are accomplishing is making sure that women are not aware of the resources available. And that is one of the fights that we have to fight, is we have to literally make sure that women are aware of the options that they have, which is why Standing With You literally door knocks in communities. They go door to door.
Which you guys can find, just real quick plug, at standingwithyou.org.
Yeah. And if you want to get involved, if you want to make sure that women have resources, you can literally go door to door in communities and say, are you aware of the pregnancy resource centers in your own community? Are you aware of the abortion industry in your own community? Because pro-choicers are not doing that, and they never will, because they rely on abortion. And if they don't have abortion, they scream and cry and say that all their rights are taken away and women are scared and vulnerable. Yeah, a post-Roe America led by pro-choicers probably would leave women scared, vulnerable, and alone.
You're right. It's funny when we hear that we don't do anything. I mean, just yesterday you posted on your stories a little baby that you guys helped saved, your family helped saved, that you were babysitting so that the mother could do work, meaning you're helping after the baby's born.
Exactly. I
Oh
know. And
my
I'm like, I
gosh.
actually don't get asked
It
that much. It's
happens.
not like I'm getting hundreds of DMs of people asking for my assistance and I deny them. Like, if there was anyone local to me that was like, hey, Autumn, I know I don't know you. You don't know me. I am facing an unexpected pregnancy. Is there anything you can do? I'd be like, oh, yeah, bring the baby over, or I'll come to your house. I'll work from your apartment. I will fundraise. It's just like the lie that pro-lifers don't do anything. It's just like, I don't really even know how to combat that with anything else other than just saying it's a flat out
Watch us.
lie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just a
And
lie.
here's the other thing is not everything is advertised too. Sometimes like, the baby showers you mentioned, I do those on my page. I
Yeah.
advertise those. I share them because I rally pro-lifers to help out too. But there's things that we do behind the scenes. I've been working for a woman now for, gosh, almost a year because she was pregnant, lost a baby. She's been pimped out by her husband. She's pregnant again. And I've been working with her behind the scenes, but people don't see that.
Right.
So they just automatically assume you're doing nothing. I took one of the moms that we helped with a former baby registry to lunch the other day just to see how she was doing and to check in on her. We don't have to advertise everything that we do. And you don't know what people are doing to help, but we are helping, and we're the ones who are helping. I wrote down here, in 1 year, Pregnancy Resource Centers served 1.85 million people, provided $267 million in free services. That's something we don't make money off of helping people. Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry makes money off of taking
They
the
charge for
lives of
everything.
babies. Yeah, we don't make money. Nobody's over here getting rich off of helping women with baby registries and doing diaper fundraiser, or doing diaper drives, or babysitting for women like you're doing. Nobody's getting rich off of doing this. We do it because we love women. We want to support them. We want to support their babies. We've given parenting courses to 313,000 people, provided 1,290,079 packs of diapers, and supplied 2,033,513 baby outfits. And that's just 1 year of Pregnancy Resource Centers. And that's not including what everybody does on their own. That's not including what I do because I'm not a Pregnancy Resource Center. That's not including what many other people do because they're not Pregnancy Resource Centers. We love women and we love their babies, and we're here to help no matter the cost, no matter if it comes out of our own bank account, our own time, our own efforts. We want to help. That's literally what we do. That's why we exist.
And if anyone who's listening is sick of hearing that, call your pregnancy resource center, ask to volunteer, ask if you can fundraise for them, or get involved with Standing With You. Just do the work. And then the next time somebody says you're pro-birth, show them the receipts. Done. That's all you have to do.
Okay, moving on, because I know we could just go on and on and on. No uterus, no opinion. We're told that men aren't allowed to have, these days we're told men can get pregnant, but we're also told that men aren't allowed to have an opinion on abortion and that they should just stick out of it because they don't have a uterus. What do you say to that?
I will say there have been a few times where honestly, I wish this were true, because there have been times where I've been at a pro-abortion rally being punched, shoved, and elbowed by old white men. And part of me wants to be like, you know what? Get out. Like, yeah, maybe I agree with them. Like, you should not be here. But in reality, this argument is so interesting to me because you have especially like radical pro-abortion feminists, right? Along the same vein is the like we hate men movement. Like that's literally movement. Like we hate all men. That is what they chant all the time. And so it's ironic that they hate men, and you have to ask the question why, right? Well, maybe because they've hurt them, because they are terrible boyfriends, because they ditch them, because they use them. All these things leads women to hate men, right? And yet, they support men who support abortion. But why do men support abortion? Usually, men support abortion because they are weak. They want to use women for sex with no consequences, and they want to be able to skip out the door when they're done. So it's so ironic that feminists hate men, but then praise them when men are like, yeah, I want to ditch you. I want to have sex with you, and then I want to leave you alone and vulnerable. Maybe I'll drive you to Planned Parenthood. Maybe, because I'm a great guy, right? I'll drop you off at the front corner. But
I won't even stay in the waiting room for you. I'll just circle the block while you're in there.
I've stood outside of Planned Parenthood and you just see them. They don't even pull in the parking lot. Like they literally pull up to the curb. Their girlfriends jump out. They come back an hour later. The girl has tears in her eyes and a little brown paper bag in her hand, and they get back in the car and they drive off. And I'm just like, you're the worst. You're the worst. Don't even go in there with her. Yeah, you're the worst. So I think what's important is like, again, it takes two people to create a child. It has a mother and a father, and both parents should have a say in their child's well-being. One of the most heartbreaking things I've ever seen in my life is I was testifying at a local council meeting, and there was people who were pro-choice and people who were pro-abortion, and they were sharing their two sides. And this older gentleman, he got up and he was very calm and quiet, and he talked really slow. And I remember he started sharing that his now wife, when they were young and dating, he got her pregnant and he encouraged, her to get an abortion. And then he paused and his eyes started watering, and he just said, "It is the biggest regret of my life, and there is not a day that goes by that I do not think about my baby that I told her to kill." And I think that it opened my eyes a lot to, I know we talk so much about abortion hurts women. We know that, but abortion also hurts men. Fathers are losing their children. Just a couple months ago, I had this gentleman reach out to me on social media, and he was in a panic because he got his girlfriend pregnant. He wanted to have the baby. He was excited. They were excited. She was like 4 or 5 months along, and then all of a sudden, I think they had some sort of argument. She ghosted him, booked an abortion, had the abortion, never talked to him again. And there was about 5 days where he knew that the abortion was scheduled, and he was, I've never seen somebody fight so hard. He was like showing up at her work, showing up at her apartment, to the point to where she literally told him, "If you come near me again, I'm getting a restraining order against you." He wasn't being aggressive. He was literally pleading that she doesn't kill his child, and he felt so hopeless. He felt so weak that he couldn't do anything. And I think that's the tragedy, is when we make this just a woman's issue, not only do we encourage weak men to not get involved, but we are excluding men from the ability to protect their children. We know that God designed men to be protectors. That is their job. That is their duty. And that does not just apply to their future wives, their girlfriends, their sisters. It applies to their children and children all around them. The most vulnerable people on this earth, men are supposed to protect. That is their job. And so when I see men pull back of, "Oh, everyone tells me no uterus opinion," no. If you believe that, if you allow that to influence your decisions, you are failing in your duty to protect. That is your job. And so it takes two people to create a child. Men should have a say in their child's well-being. Not only that, they should be protecting the weak. It's part of who they are. It's in their DNA. And so I think we need to empower men to speak up, to ignore the crazy, radical pro-abortion advocates who try to tell them, well, they tell the pro-lifers that no uterus, no opinion, and then they praise the weird pro-choicers that like punch women, but whatever. So I just think that it might be a talking point that you just have to kind of ignore and fight against. There might not be a way for you to convince somebody. You just have to keep fighting. I think we need to not let people bully us and scare us into not speaking out. You don't have to wait for somebody to be like, "Green light, you can go, you can speak up." Follow your own conviction and follow what you know to be true, and be strong and walk through with grace and love and compassion, but don't compromise because somebody might tell you that you need to shut up. Just don't listen to them.
Right. What I always tell people, and it's so simple. Obviously, you give the thought out, and I'm so glad I had you on because you're so great at apologetics. And sometimes I just like to clap back at people and just get really sassy. And they're like a 21-year-old, and I'm like, "Okay, you're like 12. Go learn to ride a bike. I don't even want to deal with you right now."
Well, some of my DMs, you can always
yeah.
tell when I'm tired and I've been answering a lot because I'll just send like one sentence, or my new favorite emoji is this one. Like, it's a new emoji. So whenever pro-choicers are like, "Go F you, blah, blah, blah," I just send that. I'm just like,
yeah,
that's it.
I sometimes just clap back. So I'm glad you're here to help me go through this with everybody because, I can do the long thought out process or responses. Sometimes I just get very frustrated though. And I know other people do too. But what I say with this one, with the no uterus, no opinion, is right and wrong does not have a gender, whether it's rape or sex trafficking or child abuse or anything else. You don't have to be a certain gender to be against what is evil and immoral. Period. That's it.
Yeah.
End of story. Okay. So government shouldn't tell women what to do with their bodies.
This one kind of goes back to the my body, my choice. Well, is it a woman's body? We're not regulating what she can and cannot do with her body. We're regulating what she can and cannot do with her child's body. In a similar way of women can be prosecuted for intentionally neglecting their child, for abusing their child, you know, you could say, oh, well, it's her child, or, you know, it's dependent on her. They use that same argument for abortion. Well, as long as it's dependent on her, she can do whatever she wants with it. That's not true. That's literally not true anywhere else in the law. Because somebody is dependent does not mean you can abuse them, kill them, torture them. You don't get to do that. And so since we know that science says that it is a separate, unique human being that has never existed before and will never exist again, it is a child that is separate from the mother. It has its own heart. You know, we go through the same talking points with the response to My Body, My Choice. And in terms of the government, it's funny because they say this, oh, the government shouldn't get to say what I want to do with my body. And yet they freak out when the government like tries to step back and be like, no, you shouldn't kill you, whatever. Like, no, they want the government to regulate. They just want the government to regulate in their favor, that they can have abortions whenever and wherever. And the reason that the government is involved is because if it kills a human being, right, that's wrong. It's a moral wrong. And there should be laws against that, just like how it is illegal for somebody to go out in the middle of the street and murder a random person just because they want to. Like, we live in a society.
I can't come punch you in the face just because I want to. The government regulates what we do with our body all the time.
And, so we live in a society with rights and wrongs. And it's time for not only the Supreme Court, but it's time for our country to recognize that preborn children are humans, and they are worthy of life, and they are definitely, they definitely deserve better than having forceps and needles shoved into their body and inducing heart attacks and ripping off their limbs and crushing their souls and sucking their brains out. Babies deserve better than that. And that shouldn't be controversial. And we shouldn't be so offended when, you know, people are like, oh yeah, the government should probably make that illegal.
They do deserve better than that. And the government's job is to protect our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And you can't have liberty or the pursuit of happiness or any other right without the right to life. The right to life comes first. Without that, none of our other rights matter. So this one's always funny to me because you don't even have to bring religion into it. Obviously, you and I are both Christian. You can just say, I think it's wrong to kill babies. And all of a sudden they're like, stop forcing your religion on me. Stop it. Okay, I didn't even bring religion into this. You did, but okay.
Yeah, they're always the ones that bring it up. I my favorite thing is I'll be talking to somebody and you can always tell that they know they're losing when they stop the conversation and go, are you a Christian? I'm like, wait, we were like literally having a conversation about fetal development. Why are you bringing this up? But you can tell because it's like their last straw to discount you, right? Like, I cannot tell you how many times. Do you go to church? I'm like, yeah. Okay, let's get back to the conversation. Yeah, okay, I'll ask you a question. Like, are we just trying to get to know each other better? Like, what's going on here? Like, why are you even bringing this up? And so I always say, like, well, first of all, my favorite thing to point to is all my wonderful, amazing pro-life friends who aren't Christians. Okay, well then what are they doing? If it's only a religious view, then what are all of these pro-life Democrats, pro-life atheists, what are they doing, right? Because at least some people can recognize it is not a religious issue. It is a human rights issue. Yes, I am pro-life because I'm a Christian. I am pro-life because I understand that we are made in the image of God and we are image bearers of Him. And abortion is a violation of God's creation. I am pro-life because of that. But I'm also pro-life because I believe in science and I recognize science. I would hope that even if I wasn't a Christian, I would still be able to recognize that killing people is wrong. Just like how killing a living born person is wrong. Killing a living preborn person is also wrong. And it goes back to the science of life begins at conception. Life begins at conception. And since life begins at conception, ending that life is murder. And therefore, abortion is wrong because it kills a life. It's very simple. I always tell people, great, we don't have to bring up religion one time. If you're not comfortable with that, we don't have to even bring that up, right? I can talk about it from a purely scientific stance. Usually they're like, no, you're just pro-life because you're Christian. Okay, but I can have a conversation and not bring up faith. Okay, are you ready to engage? Oh, still no? Oh, got it, because you don't know what you're talking about. I see.
It's funny because they're always the one to bring religion into it. And to me, it makes the most sense because I see pro-life atheists all the time. They exist. Mm-hmm. There's lots of them. Yeah. It makes the most sense to be pro-life if you're not religious, because if you're agnostic or you're atheist and you don't believe that there is any sort of life after this, then what gives you the right to take the one and only life from this baby? So to me, it makes more sense to be pro-life if you don't have any sort of religion that you believe in. Okay, moving on. We need safe abortions. If you ban abortions, you're just going to ban safe ones. Women are going to have abortions in back alleys and they're going to die.
First, there's no such thing as a safe abortion. In every successful abortion, at least one person dies, the preborn child. Therefore, abortion is not safe. Second of all, women die from legal abortion every single year, but they don't share that because anytime there's an ambulance at a Planned Parenthood, everyone covers it up and pretends like it doesn't happen. Most of the time, they're not even reporting these, but we know it happens. We know that abortion is not safe. We also know that there are an immense side effects that come with abortion, whether they're mental, whether they're physical. For some women, it can increase infertility rates, it can increase a number of health issues, but it also, if you look at the statistics, women who have abortions are much more likely to have suicidal thoughts, to struggle with anxiety, to struggle with depression. It is not good for women. It harms women. It's bad for their bodies to, in an instant, completely reject and change their hormones by taking the baby out. It's not good for women's bodies. And so that is just simply a lie. But we also know that along with this same argument, people will bring up, though, fine, you can ban abortions, but that's not going to stop them from happening. Women are still going to have abortions. They're just going to be dangerous coat hanger abortions. Nobody's telling you have to shove a coat hanger up a woman's vagina. Sorry, we're actually telling you not to do that, okay? Stop being weird. No, that's creepy. When people are like, all right, well, then we're going to have coat hanger abortions. No, you don't have to do that. Nobody has to do that. Stop saying that. The issue is, and this is why they go there, pro-lifers want to make abortion illegal, unthinkable, and unnecessary. Pro-choicers just want abortion, right? So when we say we're going to ban abortion, that also means we are going to increase resources. We're going to make sure women have help. We're going to make sure they have the ability to go to school, whether that's financial help, whether that's childcare, whatever it looks like. That's the difference. As we say, yes, we understand that women may need help, but we know that no situation will be made better by killing an innocent human being. So instead of killing the child, let's just actually help the woman, right? So when they say this, they're just trying to prove a point that women are in need. We know that. But we also know that the solution is not to use coat hangers to induce abortions. It's not safe. But you can also look at what they'll say is abortion rates do not decrease when abortion becomes illegal. But that's not true. You can look at the statistics from 1972 and the previous years. There weren't thousands and thousands and thousands of illegal abortions happening. It just doesn't. We know that in 1973, when Roe v. Wade was passed and abortion became legal in all 50 states, that it increased abortion because it was all of a sudden so accessible. And then throughout the years, it became normalized.
Well, in the year before Roe was passed, and as another thing to point out too, more people died from legal abortions than illegal abortions. And anyone talking about women died by the tens of thousands need to look up Bernard Nathanson because he is the one who made this up. He's the co-founder of NARAL, which is a big pro-abortion organization. He became pro-life and then essentially admitted to lying about this. It wasn't happening by the tens of thousands. It was something that they used to push abortion to pass Roe, to make women think that they needed it and it was necessary. And these back alley abortions weren't necessarily happening in back alley. They weren't happening in back alleys. They were happening in doctors' offices. Doctors were doing them undercover. So it wasn't, this idea is just another thing that is meant to scare you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's no such thing as safe abortion. And again, you need to take control of the narrative. I think that pro-choicers are so kind of like what we were saying is you got to stop being on the defense and start being on the offense because there's so many people who they're just used to controlling the narrative. Pro-choicers are used to saying whatever they want and knowing that pro-lifers are scared because pro-choicers are kind of vicious. We have students that have gotten kicked off their campus, that have been harassed, that have been doxxed. The list goes on that pro-choicers are more aggressive. And so we've gotten used to living in a society where pro-lifers can't speak up, but pro-choicers get to say whatever they want. Stop doing that. Start saying whatever you want. And then when they fight back, just stay firm. We have truth on our side. We have science on our side. They're just not used to having to face that. And so when we're talking about these things, so often they are going to result in being mean and being aggressive and bringing up all of these like emotional stories that just make you seem like such a terrible person. Stop speaking in hypotheticals, talk about the reality of the situation, and we can have a conversation. We need to take control of the narrative and stop being scared of these people, because life is winning. We know that. Culture is changing, and there's a lot more pro-lifers than you think. They're just kind of too scared to speak out because pro-choicers get a little bit crazy.
Which is what we're helping you with now, because we want you to
Yeah.
speak out. We're giving you the ammunition you need in your pro-life arsenal. This is meant to help you speak out. That's literally the name of the show. Moving on to the next question really quickly. You want kids to grow up in foster care or be abused. They're better off aborted. How dare you? I feel like I need a blue like wig on and the I love abortion
Literally.
dress
Yeah.
that all these
I'll
people
order you one
wear.
on Amazon. We'll do this again. You'll order the blue rug. It'll be perfect. I would just say that death is not a solution to suffering, right? So if the argument is they will suffer or they may suffer, okay, then the solution would be to try to alleviate some of that suffering, not kill the person, right? Whenever they bring this up, I find it incredibly offensive because they are exploiting the stories and the lives of these people that have had difficult situations. Children that have grown up in foster care system, maybe some of them have, but a majority of these people that are using this argument can't even relate, right? So they'll yell at me, you don't relate, you're privileged. I'm like, you don't even relate. What are you talking about? You're just using them as ammunition to prove a point and justify abortion. That's offensive.
Right.
I have talked to people, my dear cousin who lives with us, she grew up in and out of foster care system. She will tell you that she would rather be here than dead. Yes, her life was objectively probably more difficult than the average person, but she's here because where there's life, there's hope, and circumstances change, but abortion removes all hope. And so when we're talking about this, the solution would be, okay, great. Then let's figure out how we can support families, how we can improve the foster care system, how we can make adoption an easier process, right? Those are the conversations that we should be having. So when they are using these stories to exploit people and to try to prove that abortion is necessary, we need to address what the real problem is. The problem is maybe that the foster care system is not awesome. The problem is not that the baby exists. So we need to shift the focus on what the actual issue is and work to address that. Not just blame the innocent, precious, adorable baby for all the problems in the world. They did not ask to be there, right? They were created, they were brought into this world, and they should not suffer because somebody maybe doesn't want them or because they may grow up in a difficult circumstance, right? Eliminate the suffering, not the sufferer. Done.
This argument with the foster care or kids at the border or abused children or what they throw at you because they're trying to distract you from talking about abortion. This even goes for the issue of rape, which we're going to get into in a little bit. But they're piggybacking off of the trauma of other people in order to defend abortions because they can't do it on their own. They need to pull from everybody else's trauma and say, what about this? When all of these people who have been conceived in rape, people who have grown up in foster care, people who have been abused, they're happy with their life. They want to be here. They don't think that they're better off dead. And it's offensive to say that they're better off dead. Everybody has endured some type of hardship. And this basically says if you're enduring hardship, you should have been aborted. We have all endured hardship. We're coming out of a 2-year pandemic and people's businesses have been closed and people have fallen on hard times and there's been poverty. None of these people are better off dead because with this argument, you essentially say that everyone is better off dead. Because everybody falls on hard times, hardship, whether that's poverty or abuse or depression or whatever.
Yeah.
We all experience that.
How privileged is that view, right? Well, I was born into a loving family with 2 parents, and I have a great life, and I have nice clothes and nice shoes, so I deserve to live. But the kids that grew up in foster care system, they're not as good as me, right? Like that. If you really go down to the root of that argument, that's what it's saying. Well, I'm alive.
Yeah.
I'm alive. And I should be here. I'm glad I'm alive.
Right.
But I feel like people who might have less things than me, worse lives, they should probably be dead, right?
Yeah.
What? Like, they call us privileged, but they are literally saying that children with disabilities, children with Down syndrome, with heart defects, whatever, also children that may be born into a difficult circumstances, they should be dead. That's the most privileged thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And it is so offensive to even think or say those things. It's ridiculous.
It is. I grew up in a period of time. My parents were broke as a joke and struggled putting food on the table. And the pro-life community would say, "Hey, how can we help you buy more groceries?" Because that's what we do. We help moms and families and children and babies. But that argument says, "Oh, you can't afford to put food on the table. Your family might be really hungry and hard off financially. You're better off dead." That's what it says. Okay, next we have, I'm personally pro-life. It's not my business what other people do. I wouldn't have an abortion, but it's okay if somebody else does because that's their life.
Yeah, I would say the 62 million children that were brutally murdered were ripped limb to limb, their skulls crushed, their brains sucked out, and thrown in the garbage deserve better than you being personally pro-life. They deserve for you to speak up, to say this is wrong, and not only speak up, but do something and fight against it. We're not talking about hypothetical people, right? We're not talking about clump of cells. If you know that it is a baby, then act like it is a baby. If you saw a toddler being murdered on the street, what would you do? What would the reaction you have be? Probably pretty drastic, right? And so I think people who are personally pro-life, I've had people who will message me and say things like, I'm pro-life too, but what you're doing is just unnecessary. You don't need to engage in protests and standing outside of a Planned Parenthood. That's just weird. No, if you are not willing to do, you cannot judge pro-lifers because pro-lifers are acting as if they are children being murdered. And so we need to have the same urgency we would if we saw a 3-year-old child being killed. Honestly, we cannot acknowledge that it is a human life that is being murdered and not care. I honestly simply cannot relate to you. If you do not care that children are dying, it may be time to reflect on why you think that way. Is it because you have fallen victim to the narrative of the pro-choice movement that you're not allowed to speak up? What is it? Identify why either you don't care or why you don't speak up and start to work through that, because people who don't understand that it's a life, that's almost easier for me to wrap my head around, because if they truly don't know, then I almost don't blame them for not understanding, right? But if you consider yourself pro-life, that means that you recognize that life begins at conception and a child in the womb is a victim of abortion. We have to care about that. I don't really know what else to say other than if it is a child, act like it is a child.
Right. It's either wrong or right. You can't say
Right.
I'm personally pro-life. I wouldn't kill my children, but it's okay if other people do. Either killing your children is wrong
Right.
or it's right. There's no in between. So if it's wrong for your children, it's wrong for everybody else's children. Somebody else's child is not less valuable than your child. All children
Right.
are inherently valuable.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have children, but there's been times where I've just pictured, like, I just imagine myself if I was in the delivery room and I had my baby on my chest moments after giving birth and somebody walked in and tried to kill my child, I would do anything. I don't care if they strap me down. I would fight until the very bitter end. That would be my reaction. It would be anger and urgency, right? And then I think, do I have that same feeling of sadness and anger when it comes to the children that I do not know? Just because they are not my child does not make them any less valuable. And so, kind of like you were saying, I think it'd be easy for us to say, well, I would never kill my child. Okay, then why do you think any child is worthy of that? Why do you think anyone should have the ability to do that? Oh, your child is more important? Your child is more precious? Well, all children are precious, and no child deserves to be killed in the womb. It's just the reality of this world. And I think that we really need to act in a sense of urgency when it comes to abortion.
Right. If you are pro-life, you have to foster all babies. You have to adopt all babies. You have to put in the work. You have to do this. You have to do that. We kind of touched on this a little bit with some of the other ones, but if you're pro-life, you have to also do X, Y, and Z.
The pro-life movement began after Roe v. Wade, when abortion became legal in the United States. The pro-life movement is a anti-abortion movement. It has historically been, and it always will be. The pro-life movement is anti-abortion. And so when people try to add all these other things, they're just different issues. It doesn't necessarily mean they're not important. It's just not what the pro-life movement is. And it is not wrong to say, I choose to focus on this issue, right? You would not say the same thing of somebody fighting against sex trafficking and saying, well, there's like a million other problems. And so you're actually a bad person for only focusing on that because there are other people suffering. Well, to some extent, we can only do what we can. You know, we're one person who can only emotionally and physically juggle so many issues. And there's nothing wrong with choosing to focus on abortion. Not only that, I think it is justified to focus on abortion because 62 million children have died. That warrants its own movement. It is a huge issue. Not only that, most of the time when people are using this against you, they're probably people who fight and, talk about children at the border, right? So flip it on them. Okay, actually, shut up. You're not allowed to talk until you go to the border. You feed every child. You get them new shoes. You get them new clothes. You bring them into your home and you
Tell
bring
'em.
them out of poverty. You do not get to speak
Yeah.
up until you fix that problem. Do you think the people crying on Twitter actually do anything about it? No, they just share photos of poor children and complain. Like they're not doing anything either. And so just flip it on them and say, okay, you're not allowed, just pick something. Okay, you're not allowed to talk about dangerous crime rates until you solve crime, right? Okay, you're not allowed to talk about people who die from cancer or who aren't allowed or who aren't able to afford chemo because it's too expensive. You're not allowed to complain about that until you fix the problem. You're not allowed to talk about that until you fix the problem. No, that's not the society we live in. Sorry. You do not have to completely solve an issue before you say that it is wrong. Killing people is wrong. And I will do whatever I can, but I can only do so much. So I have to rest in that. Know that there are others who are walking alongside me. And hopefully, if everyone brings all of their resources, all of their talents together, we can save a lot of those children. We can make a difference in these areas of life. But the bottom line is you don't have to completely solve an issue before you're allowed to say that something is wrong.
Right. I did a reel on this one yesterday because it just makes me so mad. And this is like one of those clapback situations. But ultimately, to be pro-life, you just have to be opposed to the killing of babies. That's it. That's all you have to do to be pro-life. Pro-lifers typically are the ones who put in the effort, do the work, lift, the heavy weights of helping all of these women and their babies. We do put in our time and effort and money. We do all of that. But you don't have to do that to be pro-life. You don't have to solve all of the rape cases in order to be opposed to rape. You don't have to solve sex trafficking in order to be opposed to sex trafficking. Yeah. It's okay to just be opposed to it. You should be opposed to what is wrong. Yeah. This kind of is a little bit on the same topic. You can't be pro-life if you don't support social programs. You have to support universal health care. You have to vote for leftist policies. You have to support free daycare if you're going to actually be pro-life and make all of these babies be born.
For this one, it's kind of the same. It's you don't have to solve a problem before you get to say that killing an innocent human being is wrong. We can also look at, pro-lifers. We're not just relying on that. We know that a lot of those programs aren't perfect. We know that a lot of those programs aren't exactly what they're promised to be. But what we do know is that when communities come together and say, I will step up, I will walk alongside women, that's where we see the most growth. That's where we see the most beauty. That's where we see the most change. And so to some extent, while it is not our responsibility to then care for all of these women, we do because we have compassion for them and we love them and we want to see them succeed. And so it's kind of one of those things, it's not a requirement, but it's not a bad thing if you do it. So whether it's, fund, whatever it looks like, any kind of support, help for mothers, you have to see that you don't have to do those things before you are allowed to say that abortion is wrong. But a lot of pro-lifers do those things anyways because we care so much about this movement as a whole. Not just about the children, but about the families, the mothers, the fathers, the siblings. We do really care and we are, acting on that. It's not just, we're not just talking the talk. I think a lot of pro-lifers really are walking the walk as well.
Yeah, I think we can have conversations about all of these programs. We can also have conversations about the abuse of all of these programs, but we don't kill babies just because we're not having these conversations. We need to have the conversations and save babies at the same time. And we can do that. But a lot of these social programs that they're talking about, free daycare, free healthcare, all of those things, we provide those. Like the government obviously has some of those programs too as well, but we do that. We give women free healthcare. We help pay for their healthcare. We give women free daycare or scholarships or, whatever it is that they need, housing, food, cars, lawyers, parental counseling. We do all of that stuff. Yeah. So this idea that it's not there, it is, and they just demonize us for doing it because they don't want people to know that we do it. This is a funny one that we hear all the time. I wouldn't say funny because none of these are funny. They're all stupid and bogus. But I hear it often. If there was a burning building, and they're trying to catch you on this. If there was a burning building and there's 100 senior citizens in one building, and next door there's a burning building and there's 5 embryos in there, which one are you going to save first?
This one is so funny to me. I've also heard it of like, there's one toddler and 1,000, right? They have so many different versions of this.
Or 1,000 embryos.
And so I'm sure everyone listening has probably heard a different version. So the reason that this is, they just think it's like, oh, I gotcha, right? Like they'll say it and be like, haha, you don't really believe that fetuses are valuable, right? We have to recognize that in that situation, your instinct and your decision does not mean that you are saying the other person, the other group of people is not important, right? If I was in a burning building and I saw 1,000 embryos and a toddler, you don't get to say that I only get to pick one. I'm going to grab that kid. I'll probably grab a handful, shove them, and I'm going to run out. Like choosing one thing over the other does not mean that fetuses are not people, right? It's a dumb scenario. It's a dumb analogy because people are not people based on whether or not we would choose them to pick up and take out of a burning building, right? They are people because science says that life begins at conception and humans have human rights, okay? So when we use this scenario and people are trying to like catch it, it's just don't fall for it. But like, You know what? This is what I always say. I am happy to talk about real situations, real stories. I'm not going to go around with a bunch of hypotheticals, okay? That's just not useful, right? If you're going to just make up scenarios, if you can only prove your point by fake situations, your position's probably not that strong, right? So let's stop with the hypotheticals. Let's talk about real instances, the reality of the situation, and let's have a real conversation, right? Because I can make up a bunch of fake stories too, but that's not going to get us anywhere.
Well, let's say that situation is real. My house is on fire and my children are inside it. My next door neighbor's house is on fire and there's a family of 7 people in there. And I can only save one. I only have time to save one. I'm going to save my children.
Yeah.
Period. That's who I'm going after. That does not mean that the family next door is less valuable than my family. Or
not humans, right? Because that's what they're trying to prove.
I'm going to save my kids. Period. That's what I'm going to do. That's what any mother should do. So it's just meant to distract you. It's meant to say that, oh, well, you don't think they're valuable. No, I do think my neighbors are valuable and their lives are no less valuable than my children, but those are my children and I'm going to go save them. So it's meant to distract you. All of these arguments are really meant to distract you from talking about abortion. This is one of the biggest ones, and you probably get this question the most. We hear it all of the time. It's a very emotional one. It's very hard. In cases of rape or incest, and especially they usually say it's an 11-year-old girl or a 10-year-old girl, in cases of rape or incest, you're going to force these women or force these little girls to have babies. How heartless of you.
With this one, I think before we dive into the argument, I always tell people, especially with this argument, you have to remember that you are talking to a person, not just trying to win an argument, because I think that a dangerous path for us as, maybe it's easier with other arguments, the snarky, right? We know that we're right and we can wrap it up in a snarky little sentence and we just feel justified and quick. But I think that we also need to recognize that maybe people, yes, there's probably people that are bringing up this situation just to make you uncomfortable and to try to prove a point and just to make you look like a terrible person. But it may also be somebody that has suffered or been a victim of sexual assault, sexual abuse. Maybe they had a close family member. And so this argument especially is very, very, very personal, which is also why it's difficult for us to respond to because we can't relate the same way they can. We don't have those feelings. We don't know what that's like exactly. And so I think first and foremost, to remember, especially put it at the forefront of your brain to be compassionate and listen and caring, because we do not want to just kind of bulldozer over them and make them feel unseen, unloved, whatever it might be. But we also need to recognize that human beings are human beings. And when we're talking about life in the womb, regardless of their circumstances of conception, they are still a person worthy of life. And that child should not suffer because of the sins of their father. One of my colleagues, Christine Yeargin, she always says that people are not born with a score system on their birth certificate, right? Well, my parents, they had a lovely romantic night with wine and chocolate, and that's when they conceived me. So I get a 10, right? Oh, but you were conceived in a less ideal situation. So you have like a 2, right? You're a less valuable person. That's not how it works. We are born into this world, welcomed into this world as human beings worthy of dignity and worthy of life. And so I think the thing that I notice the most is people try to only focus it on the woman and say, well, she shouldn't have to suffer. First, the rapist should be held to the fullest extent of the law. He should be prosecuted and he should be punished. What we also know, though, is that abortion does not remove the trauma of rape. It does not erase it. It does not make it go away. And I think that a lot of people act almost as if it does, right? Well, a woman was raped. She should have an abortion because otherwise she'll have to live with that for the rest of her life. Well, no, what that woman needs is healing, resources, care, love, whatever it looks like. That woman deserves true care, not to walk into a Planned Parenthood, for them to kill her baby, and for them to send her out the door $500 more broke with no resources. That is not going to help women. A lot of people will say, well, I went through a difficult circumstance, or I had an abortion and I don't regret it. Just because somebody may not regret a decision, or maybe they are claiming that it helped them, we don't know that to be true. We don't know. And when you talk to women who have chose life after these circumstances, they've actually said that their child was the most healing thing that could have come out of that situation, that it was the only beauty that they saw, and that it actually helped them heal. An argument that you'll hear is, okay, well, what if the woman decides to have a baby and, when the child is 3 or 4 years old, he starts having physical characteristics of the dad? That's traumatic for her, and she shouldn't have to live with that. So she should just kill the baby before. Well, that doesn't even make sense, because, okay, well, would you kill the child at 3 or 4? What if that does happen, right? That doesn't mean that the child should be murdered because it may look like the person that assaulted them. No, what we should be doing is providing her with true care, true resources, so that she can be healed. There is healing for her. And so a lot of times people will focus only on the woman. They'll only focus on the woman. But we need to focus. There are 2 people that need protection in this situation, and we do not have to choose one or the other. We can choose both of them. We can provide them both with care and with healing. We do not have to kill the child because of this. So it's a difficult conversation. It's one that you'll have to be very genuine with, and I hope it's one that you truly care about. We know that there are really difficult situations surrounding conception of a lot of children, but the bottom line is that a innocent child should not be murdered in any circumstance for any reason.
You guys, this is exactly why I had Autumn on, because when she says sometimes we have the snarky responses, that's usually me. And I do agree with her 1,000,000% on everything that she just said. We do have to approach it genuinely and compassionately, but I do also want to point out the fact that a lot of people, yes, there are people who have been raped, and yes, it is horrific, but a lot of people also use this argument because it's an easy emotional one, and they want to throw it at you because they don't necessarily know how to defend the other 99% of abortions, because rape and incest combined account for less than 1% of abortions, and that's not something that you should lead with. We should do it, exactly how Autumn said, compassionately.
I think that is a good question to ask people.
It is. It's something that people will throw at you and be like, see, you're evil. You don't care about people who have been raped, when really they're using the trauma of rape victims to justify 99% of all other
Right.
abortions.
Yeah, something that I kind of to get them on that is I will say, "Oh, okay, so you support restrictions on all abortions except for in instances of rape and
Yeah,
incest." And they'll be, "No, no, women should still have access." Then stop using that argument. If
exactly.
you are simply using that to justify all abortions by 1% of abortions that are extremely traumatic, extremely difficult, then you
Horrific. Yeah.
cannot use that it's insensitive. It's offensive for you to use that to justify all when you're just talking about the 1%. And so that's a good question. And I think to ask people is just, okay, so do you only agree with abortion in circumstances of rape and incest? And if they say no, then okay, well then let's talk about all the other. Let's just set aside, right, that 1%. I want to know what you believe and where you stand with the majority of abortions that are happening simply because women get pregnant unexpectedly and don't want a baby. Let's talk about those.
So, next question. When someone says, I had an abortion and I don't regret it, I had an abortion, I love my life how it is. Had I not had
Mhm.
that abortion, I wouldn't be able to have the life that I do. Or had I not had an abortion, I wouldn't have the child that I have now.
Yeah.
This is a tough one to respond to. I even struggle with this one sometimes, much more than any of the other ones. How do you respond to this?
Usually the first thing, I start with is how do we know those to be true, especially when they say things like, I wouldn't have been able to finish my education, I wouldn't have been able to pursue my career. Really, we don't know that. You chose abortion, you killed your child, and then you did those things, but you were most likely probably very capable of doing both. And this argument kind of leads into the lie of the abortion industry that women are weak without abortion, that they cannot succeed without abortion. And a lot of times I'll say this, and pro choicers will come at me and say things like, no one is telling women that they can't succeed without abortion. They should just have the right to it and have the ability to choose that. What I always respond with is, no, no, no. When you say things like, I could not have done X, Y, and Z without abortion, what you are saying is you relied on abortion because you were not strong enough to do both. When they say, I could not have gotten my degree without my abortion, well, first of all, we don't know that. And second of all, what that's really saying is that women are incapable of doing both, and that's demeaning. Women are stronger than that. Women are strong enough to do both. They do not have to kill their children to be successful. That is a lie.
You also, I want to point out, you also don't have to do it alone because there are
Right.
resources. You wouldn't be able to get your degree because you didn't have an abortion, but
Yeah.
we have resources to help you with that, with
Mhm.
daycare, with
Yeah.
scholarships, with all of those things. That's out there. So
Mhm.
the narrative that you wouldn't be able to is A, like you said, we don't know, but also there are
Mhm.
resources to help
Oh,
all
yeah.
of these women do all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know that a lot of women they do feel like they can't do it on their own, but they don't realize that they don't have to. And so
There's
that's
help.
part of what the pro-life movement needs to continue to do is be very outspoken about the resources available, to constantly share about those, whether it's with women who may be facing unexpected pregnancies or just the general public, so that people know, so that when somebody in their life is facing an unexpected pregnancy, they know that they have options and that they can share those with them. Um, but going back to the argument, I know that a lot of women, it's kind of like a hard conversation to try to. You kind of feel like you have to try to like get them to see that their abortion was wrong. And I don't think that's necessarily our job. I think what we need to recognize is that for a lot of women, they may be pro-choice because they feel like they have to. Because if they believe that it is a child inside the womb, then they have to believe that they killed their own child. And for a lot of women, that reality is too difficult to even accept. And that's why a lot of them, they kind of just have to push it out of their mind. It's just a clump of cells. It's just a clump of cells. It's just a clump of cells. And so I think our initial reaction when people are dancing and jumping, you go to a protest and there's people who have signs that say, I have an abortion, and they're joyful and they're happy. Your initial reaction is to be angry at them. But I think we also need to recognize that it may be almost a defense mechanism of theirs to have to kind of emotionally detach from abortion, because otherwise they have to walk through that door of healing and acknowledge it. I've talked to women who are post-abortive, and they said for years, they didn't care. I mean, they didn't struggle with it. I mean, they would think about it, but It wasn't until they came to the realization that it is a baby inside the womb, that they became pro-life, that it opened a door of healing that they had to walk through. And so we have to have compassion. I think right now, this time in history and in our culture, we probably need to be super aware of that, because it is probably going to bring up feelings for women that they have chosen to ignore. When the entire country is talking about abortion, it is forcing women to think about their abortions. And I can't imagine the trauma that may open up, the feelings that they don't know how to deal with. And it's sad that, somebody who has had an abortion, even if they consider themselves pro-choice, they have to pretend that they don't care. And so I think as pro-lifers, we need to give women the room to feel, to care, to be heartbroken, to be sad, but then also to walk alongside them and give them resources, because they may not regret it now, but they may regret it someday, or they may not regret it because they just cannot even go there. And so just to have the compassion for them, to love them, they may not automatically be like, oh yeah, I now care. They may continue to chant and cheer about abortion and talk about how awesome it is. But they're most likely deep down, it's a part of them that feels sad, that feels regret, or, maybe they think about the what ifs. What if I didn't choose abortion? Where would I be? How old would my child be? I know people, I've talked to them that have said, they know the due date that their baby would have been. And every year when that time comes around, they can't help but think about it of, my child would be 3. I would have a 3-year-old right now. And I think it's raw and vulnerable for them. And so I just think as pro-lifers, we need to be overwhelmingly accepting and loving, especially of women who are post-abortive, even if they don't agree with us. Because they may feel like they are not allowed to have those feelings and still be pro-choice. Because if they have feelings about abortion, then, maybe there's something wrong about abortion, and why do you care if it's just a clump of cells, right? So we need to acknowledge that those talking points that pro-choicers use could also be making post-abortive women feel like they really need to hide out.
Yeah.
And they
Well,
deserve better than
when
that.
you treat them with love and compassion, like you're saying, you open up that door for them to come back to you and talk to you. When you condemn them or shame them for what they've done, you definitely close that. And life can be very long. And just because somebody doesn't regret it immediately doesn't mean they're not going to regret it. And we want to keep that door open so that they can come back to us and talk to us and say, you know what? Maybe I said 5 years ago I didn't regret it, but I'm starting to think about it more. I'm starting to grieve a little bit more. I'm starting to regret it more. You talked to me about this one time. Would you mind talking to me about it again? If we leave that door open, we truly show them that we love them. And we do.
Yeah.
Just because somebody has had an abortion doesn't mean we don't love them. But we love them anyway. And we love them so much that we want them to find healing and grace and redemption
Yeah.
after their abortion.
Yeah, I know I've had people share with me that they almost felt uncomfortable walking into the pro-life movement because they felt like a hypocrite, right? That they had had an abortion, that at one point in their life they supported abortion, and they just felt uncomfortable that, all these people would just think that they were evil and a murderer. Here's the thing. There is healing in Jesus Christ, and there is nothing you can do or will do that is not forgiven, that will not be forgiven. You can repent and receive full forgiveness, and you do not have to live with that guilt, with that shame any longer. That is why Jesus died on the cross. You are saved, and you are free from the guilt of sin, and there should be nothing that you have to carry. There may be a period where you have to heal. You do, but you do not have to carry the guilt and shame and walk around feeling like a terrible person every day, all day. And I promise you that within the pro-life movement, there is no judgment. There is no shame. We will not look down on you because you've had 1 abortion, 5 abortions, whatever. We are happy and excited that you are opening the door for healing, that you are opening the door to hopefully prevent other women from dealing with the same thing that you had. Maybe you chose abortion because you were scared, because you were vulnerable, because you were lied to, because you didn't know it was a baby. And now you get to use your story to share with people to hopefully prevent women from dealing with the same hurt that you had to deal with. And I think that it's powerful for people to use their stories to say, you know what, I've been there. I was there. I had an abortion at this age, and for a long time I pretended I didn't care, but you know what? I do. And I want to make sure that no woman has to go through what I went through because of how difficult and heartbreaking it was. And so whether you are post-abortive, whether you were pro-choice, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There is healing for you. There is forgiveness, regardless of what you've done. And the pro-life movement will welcome you with open arms. I promise you.
Amen. Amen. Okay, last question. And this might be one of the most depressing, heartbreaking ones that I have heard. And we're definitely seeing more and more of it as the pro abortion movement gets more radical, gets more extreme.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's people out there who say, I know it's a baby and I know it's ending a life, but I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, I just say, you need Jesus. I'm going to pray for you.
Yeah.
And, there's not much you can do when they know that it's a baby and they're just cool with killing it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I say, I'll pray for you and I walk away.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really tough one. What do you respond? Autumn is so great at like having these much more in-depth, really, really good at
I
apologetic
don't know. This
answers.
one I kind of agree with you. Like there's been a few times where we go around and around, whether it's on a college campus or outside of Planned Parenthood, and yeah, sometimes they just get to the point where they're like, "Okay, fine, it's a baby. I still don't care." What I've noticed is it seems to be usually when they are using this argument, they are doing it to just freak you out. Like
Right. As a
people on social
defense
media, a lot
mechanism.
of the comments that you get, they are doing it to just weird you out. Like when people are commenting, "Oh, I eat fetuses for breakfast every day." Like I cannot even tell you how many times
Yeah.
I've seen that comment. And it is purely to be jokey, this like dark sense of humor. And so I think and I'm not saying all, but a lot of
No,
people I
yeah,
think
because
when
there
they're
definitely
using,
are the people who
oh
exist that
yeah,
are like, I love abortion. It's
yeah,
amazing. Like I was on
yeah,
an episode of Middle Ground with one of them. She was like,
oh yeah.
abortion should be celebrated and loved and
Yeah, she was like, "I
treasured,
love abortion. I am
Yeah.
pro-abortion." I'm like, yeah, we know. But I think a lot of the people that are using this argument, they may just be trying to like throw you through a loop, right? They want to see you squirm. They want you to get all uncomfortable. They want you to not know what to say. And so there's a few things you can do. I think the first is I'm just like, okay, I can't relate to you. I think killing humans is wrong. Sorry that you
Yeah.
don't, right? Like, okay, whatever. I just really cannot ever see eye to eye. And I do not want to live in a society where we devalue human life so much that we don't care if people get murdered, right? And so you can almost just kind of like detach yourself and be like, okay, well then you and I are very different because I value human life. And so I
See how
think that
graceful
like,
you are? I'd be like, I rebuke you in Jesus' name.
like
Back
get
up out of
away.
here.
So I mean, there's definitely the times where people are like, yeah, it's a baby and I don't care. Well, then we just have to have the conversation of, okay, well then would you care if like a 3-year-old kid was just
Yeah.
murdered in the street, right? Okay, so why is it different? Why don't you care? Is it because you can't see them? Is it because you've been lied to? I think again, when people say something so insane, our best strategy is to ask questions and listen to what they
Right.
say and then ask another question regarding what they just answered to kind of get them to a more solid place, like a actual stance, right? Because when they say like, "Oh yeah, I don't care. I love killing babies," right? It's not really an argument. It's not really a conversation that we can have and be like, "Oh, well, I don't." So I think
Yeah.
that the best strategy for us is just to ask conversations. I've noticed people who use these arguments, they don't really want to. They're the ones that are like, whatever. Like I remember I was at Planned Parenthood and we were just peacefully praying and this group of girls came over and they were counter protesting us praying, and they were holding signs of like, "I am a victim of sexual assault, which is why I stand with Planned Parenthood." And she had the sign, so I went up to her and I just started talking, and at first she was just kind of saying those same talking points like, "I don't care if it's a babe, blah 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 blah." And so I addressed her sign specifically and I said, "I noticed that you have that sign. I'm so sorry for you." And then I said, I actually don't support Planned Parenthood for that reason because there is undercover evidence that they actually cover up for sexual abusers. There's videos of older men walking in with clearly underaged girls that they are not related, that she clearly is scared of him and they give her an abortion, he pays, and they walk out the door together. That
Not a lot of
clearly,
videos too.
yeah. And so
It's a
I just
reoccurring
shared
problem.
with that and she was like, "Well, I didn't know that." Like, okay. And then we continued the conversation and then it got to the point where she literally was like, "You know what? You clearly know more than me, but if I knew more than you, then I would win, but I just don't. So I'm just not talking to you anymore." And I was like, "Okay. Well,
Oh
I mean, but at
gosh.
least I got to share like, yeah, there's a lot of conversations that we can have. I think it's just kind of just like figuring out maybe an open door that you can walk through, asking questions, why do you support Planned Parenthood? Why do you support abortion, right? And that can get us into a place where we can actually have dialogue. And so usually with these crazy people that just say insane things, just ask them questions. They may squirm and just like flip you off and be like, well, I'm not having this conversation. Well, you did the best you could. You tried. You know, we can't force
Right.
people to engage in conversation with us. Sometimes we do just have to walk away and pray for them and hope that if anything, you planted a seed. You know, when we're at Planned Parenthood and people are flipping us off and cussing us out, you know, my biggest prayer there is just that we can be a witness to the community, that people driving by think, why are they there? Why are they
Yeah.
there? Okay, they're against abortion. Why are they against abortion? Well, why am I okay with it? You know, at least it gets people thinking. And when we are thinking and talking about abortion, we are winning. So sometimes it's not about winning an argument. Sometimes it's not about getting somebody on your side. It is about starting the conversation, praying for them, hoping that they do research, that it continues to convict them, whatever it may be. Your job is simply to do the best that you can, to speak up, to start the conversation, and then rest knowing that it is not completely in your control.
I also want to note for everybody listening that you don't have to show up to every argument that you're invited to.
Yeah.
When we were giving you this ammunition to use, that we're giving you all of these pro-life points and how we believe to be able to combat these things. And this is usually, and I would say use them in a conversation that somebody is willing to understand. Because a lot of times you can tell when people are just there to troll you, or they're not
Yeah.
willing to listen, or they're not trying to understand. Maybe they're committed to misunderstanding. You don't have to show up to those arguments. You don't have to debate that person. You can walk away from that. But if you're talking to somebody and they want to listen, you can usually tell the difference. It's pretty easy to tell the difference. And somebody's like, well, why do you believe this? Or why are you pro-life? Or I believe this. Like, those are the conversations you should be engaging in, because you're going to get really frustrated with the other ones. You have to know which ones to participate in and which ones to walk away from. You don't,
Yeah.
that's something that I love that people say all the time, is you don't have to show up to every argument that you're invited to.
Yeah. Yeah. I think another strategy of ours is, like you said, you don't have to engage in every conversation, even every argument, but what you can do is constantly be a reflection of
Yeah.
love and grace and truth. You
Yeah.
can, you know, continue to be outspoken on social media. You can be an example. Like, you can be the person that makes people think, wow, she's not what I thought pro-lifers were, right? Because they have all
Yeah.
these false narratives of us. They have these preconceptions of who we are, what we do, what we believe. And when we see what the pro-life movement is actually doing, for a lot of them, it's shocking. They almost don't believe it. And so my biggest advice to you is just be a reflection of what the pro-life movement really is.
Yeah.
Show up, continue to fight, continue to walk through with grace and love and compassion for everyone. And that can have a bigger impact than you realize. Simply just, you know, not being who they think you are, and refusing to comply with apathy, just to continue to care, continue to be passionate, that goes a long way. That says a lot, and that is a huge reflection of the pro-life movement to people who maybe think that we're all women-hating crazy people, right? To show them that's not who we are. I think that's one of the best assets we have, is we do have the resources. We are supporting women. We are going out of our way to protect life and protect families from abortion. And I think that
Yeah.
that's one of the best ways that we can fight this fight, is to be an
Yeah,
example.
exactly. Autumn, before we jump off of here, tell everybody where they can find you. Autumn has her own show, also powered by Students for Life, called Unapologetic. It's amazing. You should listen to it. She goes over a lot of these things in her show, even more in depth than she has here. Let everybody know where they can find you on social media.
Yes. So if you want to stay up to date with Unapologetic, that is on my Instagram at autumnhigashi.life. I'm also on the
Wait,
Students
do
for
you want
Life
to spell
page.
that for people, for all of
I
us
know.
white people who
I
might not know
married
how
a
to spell
Japanese man.
Higashi?
My maiden name was Lindsay, and it was just easier. But now I'm a Higashi, and that is Higashi. So autumnhigashi.life. You can find me there, and then also on YouTube at Unapologetic with Autumn Higashi. And that's about it. So if you want to dive even more into apologetics, that's what we talk about every other Monday over on my show. We just kind of go through what's in the culture, how to respond, how are we supposed to even think about it. And so my goal is to just be your pro-life best friend, to help you walk through this with grace and truth, so that you can be unapologetic when you are talking about your beliefs, when you are talking about the sanctity of life, and when you are talking about protecting preborn lives at all costs.
Yep. Check out Unapologetic. Go follow her on Instagram. Subscribe to her channel on YouTube. Autumn, thank you so much for joining us on Speak Out today.
Thank you.